なんだあれはセリア。
地球は変わっていくのね。
Assault Suit Leynos. This is a modern, relative to the time, remake of a Sega Genesis game we got localized as Target Erath. It is the first in the 4-game series of Assault Suit, of which I own the other one that was localized, Cybernator, on the Super Nintendo. And these are two-dimensional mech, sort of, not quite run-and guns. Implying run-and gun implies speed, but you control a mech, you use multiple weapons to blow up enemies. It's that sort of game. As a game, based on what I played, Target Erath was fine. Maybe not all that spectacular, maybe not all that interesting, but as a remake, Assault Suit Leynos is abysmal. Before we get into this, two things to note. First of all, if you are photosensitive, skip this game outright. I'm gonna do what I always do and cut around all the intense flashing I possibly can because I like you that much, but the final boss, the flashing is so intense I had to actually play it with a blindfold just to beat it because the flashing was just that bad. The other thing worth knowing is if you, like me, are going to be planning on playing this with a Steam Deck, you have to play it in compatibility mode, because if you don't, the menus kind of break really badly. It's kind of weird because the first time I actually saw this, I thought it was working properly because they say as these garbled screens appear, communication is breaking down, we can't communicate with anyone. So it's like, oh, okay, your information feeds are messed up. That makes sense, that works out well. I started to suspect something was wrong when I got to the equipment loadout screen, and after 2 inputs, it would consistently forget I had anything to input into the game. So yeah, if you want to play this on Steam Deck, you're gonna need Proton compatibility because it will just flat out not work. Now, if the intro I selected for this doesn't say it all, with its weird overlapping sprites that weren't properly consistently changed to show that each character has multiple faces while talking, yeah, this game is a remake of a game that was done in a way that feels very, very cheap and feels like a bad cash grab, plain and simple. Now, the story takes place after World War IV, and judging by how the world is looking right now, yeah, I could see that happening in our near future. I mean, we haven't even hit the 3rd one, but it seems likely at this point. Aliens, quite possibly from space, decide to descend onto the Erath, targeting it, if you will, and try to take it over. However, you, your faceless protagonist who has a wonderful set of hair, must band together with the rest of the military forces and his assault suit team to fight back, defending the Erath and saving the entire human race. Well, kind of, sort of, but actually not really. There's actually kind of an interesting plot here. The fact is there's not a lot of it. It is an action game, and while the game is more than happy to spew lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of words in between missions, very few of them actually equate to actually building a plot, and it's not until like 3 separate exposition dumps where you actually encounter your foes do you actually learn kind of what's going on and why it's going on, and I gotta admit, they actually make the villains kind of sympathetic and understandable as to why they're doing it and what they're doing. Unfortunately, there is no compromise. You still have to kill the aliens a whole bunch, and that's sort of the whole lot, although you do learn a lot about their technology and what they've had to endure, and that's actually really cool. On the flip side, you don't really learn much about your own team or characters all that much. There's a character who shows up literally to die, although if you do things just right, as I understand, you can save him, and that mission gave me 30 seconds to just stand around doing nothing because the last 30 seconds of that mission is just wasting time effectively. But you don't really get much of a sense of actual characters on your side. You've got a flight officer who seems to have a thing for you and wishes you luck before every fight, and at one point you learn that she just happened to be on break at the time, so she didn't wish you luck one time, and that's honestly about as much character development as that gets. Your character himself has no personality whatsoever. He's just generic soldier man guy with tremendous hair and no face, and yeah, there's really nothing of a story here beyond 2 or 3 exposition dumps. It just feels kind of awkwardly paced. And indeed, that pacing problem actually transitions pretty badly to the gameplay as well, because this game has 8 total levels, and they just don't have any sort of similarity in terms of size and scale. The very last level, for whatever reason, is about the size of like 4 levels crammed together, whereas like one of the levels can be beaten in probably about a minute. On the other hand, it is very bizarre how wildly varying the length of individual levels actually is in this game. game. It's very, very strange. The levels themselves are also not something that really suits my particular taste in game. 5 of the 8 levels in the game are all defense missions of some flavor or another, and like one of the offensive missions is one where you have to destroy things under a certain time limit or the ship that you're defending gets blown up. So it's still kind of skewed to being a defense mission. It's very weird, but some of these are better handled than others. The second level of the game is a straight up escort quest where you have to guard a little caravan of tanks, and you have to stand right next to them or they just full stop will not move. And enemies spawn endlessly in this, so you have to kind of stand inside your little caravan while fending off enemies, as opposed to, you know, oh, there are enemies to the right, I'll go take care of them. You guys just, you know, keep moving forward. That's how we're gonna get you out of here. Nope, they're just going to stop and wait for you, which means that effectively, unless you're actually willing to put them in danger and fight enemies inside them, the level takes like twice as long as it really should, and it's not a long level to begin with. I will say that I do kind of appreciate how varied conceptually some of the levels are. There's one level that's kind of built like a maze, there's another that's kind of built like a horizontal scrolling shmup, sort of, but then they do some other weird decisions that I don't necessarily like, because for like the back 25% of the game, for whatever reason, the game likes to pull out bullet hell mechanics out of basically nowhere, and the game is not really built for bullet hell, and the game seems to almost in a very ineffectual, very limp way kind of acknowledge this, because when the game pulls out bullet hell mechanics, they are like the most simple bullet patterns ever. It's like walk forward 2 steps, walk back 2 steps, walk forward 2 steps, walk back 2 steps, and all the time just fire at your enemy. Eventually they'll die and you won't get hit by anything. I feel like it's doing this because the game itself is at its core, at least if you're playing with the original mode, it's very, very easy, unless you basically stand in individual damage zones that will, for whatever reason, like kill you instantly. It's bizarre that this game is so easy, but it has moments where if you're just standing in the wrong spot, you might just straight up die instantaneously. Because this game is so weirdly, awkwardly programmed, it just slaps a game over screen on top of the screen, but you can still control your mech in the background while in a game over screen. It's very weird how they set this up. It's just, no, we're gonna just slap a game over screen, we're gonna say it's game over and that's it, but you can clearly see the game is still operating in the background. Like I said, everything about this feels cheap and not really well put together. Now, I think one of the biggest draws to this game in terms of gameplay is the customizability and malleability of your assault suit. At least on paper, but on practice, I'm not sure it necessarily works to the extent that it should. It's a very ambitious system. The idea is that your mech has 6 different weapons it can equip at any time, and you can cycle through them to handle all sorts of problems in the course of the game, usually by making things explode, which is fantastic. In practice, that's not really how it ultimately pans out. See, your mech has 6 slots on it. Those can be used for the weapons you unlock, or other supplementary items, but many of those supplementary things are absolutely vital to your success. So while you can equip 6 different weapons to your mech, you could also equip like 6 of the same weapons just so you have a bigger ammo pool, because ammo is a finite resource you have to manage. But there's also things like your thrusters, which you need to jump and move faster, which are absolutely vital. That takes up a slot of your weapons. There is your starting assault rifle, which is the only weapon in the game that doesn't have a finite amount of ammo. So it's kind of the single most valuable weapon in the game, so you don't really want to get rid of that. So that knocks off another weapon slot. You have a shield that I'll admit I never bothered using, but it's absolutely vital in some places, especially if you're not good at taking 2 steps forward, 2 steps back to avoid the Danmaku. So that takes up another slot. You're down to 3, and oh yeah, the game also supplies you with armor if you do well enough to earn it, and armor is effectively extra lives. And while the game itself isn't very hard, like I said, there are moments where the game will just instant kill you, and you kind of need that armor to survive that, so that kind of takes away all of your slots right there. And the thing about weapons is they aren't earned over the course of the game just by playing necessarily. They're earned by, as far as I can tell, gaining a certain amount of score. I beat the entire game, and I still hadn't seen like 60% of the weapon slots unlocked. And there's a little bit of a weird catch-22 here, because first of all, the game won't let you equip half the fun little toys that will help you increase your score by increasing your destructive power. But if the game isn't providing you with the tools to actually earn that destructive power because you're not getting the score in the first place, you can't do well enough because the game isn't giving you what you need to do well enough. You know, they're not giving you the fun toys to earn the fun toys. They're not giving you the ability to succeed to the point where you actually get the ability to experience the game as it's intended by virtue of the fact that you're not getting the fun toys that help you succeed. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of new game plus, so once you finish a round, I guess that you didn't do good enough so you don't get all the stuff. It's weird that the game limits what you can equip, and the fact that things such as your verniers, things such as your shield, things such as your actual armor so that you can survive things, take up your weapon slots, because it seems like creating a custom weapons loadout that suits your playstyle and gives you the big booms that you like, it feels like that's important, and yet everything about the game feels like it's trying to take that away from you. And it sucks. Why is it that your ability to jump and dash around, why is that taking up a weapon slot? That is a vital piece of equipment. Why is your shield doing that? That is a vital piece of equipment that has a dedicated button for it. And it's a dedicated button that only ever applies to your shield and can be used in conjunction with everything else. For whatever weird reason, the shield can just be used with everything else. It's specially programmed to effectively be a permanent passive when you have it equipped, but it still takes up an active slot. Why? That should not be taking up a weapon slot. Why is it that you want to have an expanded health bar? Why does that take up a weapon slot? I mean, at the risk of pointing out the obvious, none of those are weapons. And conversely, you do have an unarmed punch. That doesn't take up a weapon slot. I think that's a fallback in case you decide you don't want your unlimited ammo assault rifle and you just happen to run out of everything. It's very unpleasant to use, but you can do a little bit of damage while your unlimited assault rifle's reloading, I guess. It's weird how inconsistent that is as well. But yeah, your punch doesn't take up a weapon slot, but everything else seems to, even though it seems like a passive ingrained part of your mech to function on a fundamental level. And that's not the only weirdly ingrained thing that seems to end up getting stapled on vestigially, and you just sort of have to deal with that. It's very strange, but when you play the game, you unlock points. And these points go to unlocking things in the future. Basically, your total score gets tallied to a lifetime overarching score, and at certain thresholds, you level up and you gain unlocks through like a secret bonus options menu, more or less. But some of these things are absolutely weird. Like, some make sense. Like, if you hold down a certain button, you get to see, you know, your flight officer in one of the menus, or you get to unlock the manual to the Japanese Mega Drive game. Okay, that's a cool bonus option thing to unlock. I get that. Why is it that a laser sight to show where you're aiming, or a meter that shows you exactly how much thrust your thrusters have, why is that an optional bonus unlockable that you have to unlock from the secrets menu? That's a basic part of your GUI that would help inform how you're playing, and that's just an unlockable for reasons I can't understand. Likewise, weapons for training mode need to be unlocked for some reason. Isn't the whole point of training mode to, you know, train yourself so that you're better with things, not, you know, play through the game or game over a whole bunch to unlock things so then you can train? What's the point of that? I don't understand. The rest of the game itself is fairly basic. You run left to right and you shoot a whole bunch. This game desperately needs some updates in terms of controls though, because whenever you move your mech, its aim kind of fluctuates based on where your mech's natively moving, because this game decided that, oh no, we're gonna ignore the fact that over the course of 30 years, we've invented a second stick that would absolutely have made this game playable. It's not even new technology. Taito's Gunfight, released in 1975, had twin sticks. Of course, Robotron 2084, released 7 years later, had popularized it, but the fact is that 15 years before the original release happened, twin sticks existed. There's not really all that much of an excuse not to have them now, other than the original didn't have them. And the original didn't have them because it wasn't all that feasible to ask the player to hold two Genesis controllers in their hand to play a game, outside of some kind of weird one-person, two-controller speedrun challenge. And speedrunning didn't really become a thing until the early 2000s, when it evolved away from Quake done quick using nothing but in-game demos, thanks to the introduction of Metroid Prime speedrunning, which, when that was updated, was massively improved in terms of playability thanks to the inclusion of twin stick support. It's all cyclical. Technology advancing helps make things better, unless something is designed antithetical to that technology. Why not have twin stick controls? This game is just begging for them. It would be so much more comfortable to aim. Fortunately, there is the ability to lock your aim in certain places, which means that, you know, you can focus fire in one place and sort of strafe around. I didn't learn this until the final boss. So for basically the entirety of the game, my aim was locked at whatever direction my mech was vaguely trundling along at. On the bright side, the fact that I cleared all those bullet hell sections without locking on in one direction while dealing with this, I think that says something about my skill. It says something about my ineptitude that I didn't know this basic function was part of the game, but the fact that I put up with it in those bullet hell sections at least says something about my ability to deal with that nonsense. Also, how incredibly easy those bullet hell sections are, but I digress. I do have to appreciate the fact that every level does have a bunch of like secret bonus score things. It's a little unclear though. At the end of the stage, you'll see like a whole score screen flash up and it'll show you like some of the secret score stuff. It's a little unclear because it lists everything, including whether you got it or not, which I didn't really understand. Like I thought, oh, okay, I got this, I got this, I got this. No, it lists everything and then it colors it in red if you did get it, which is not immediately clear. But by doing all these sort of secret side objectives and stuff, you unlock more points and presumably more weapons that you won't be able to equip because you only have so much space and you definitely want the extra health pool. Either way, it's an interesting concept, but like everything else in the game, it just feels like it's not really cohesively linked to anything. So much as it's a cool idea someone thought up, but didn't really find a way to make it work with everything else that happens to be in the game. That generally feels like the biggest issue here, is everything here seems ambitious or an interesting idea, but it's not really ever created in a cohesive manner where it actually benefits any other particular aspect of the game. And otherwise, all you have here with Assault Suit Leynos is a very, very bland game where you kind of awkwardly, slowly stumble along shooting at things, hoping to defend a target. Oh wait, something died, start over. Checkpointing in this game is a little infrequent. Some of them do have checkpoints, usually with area transitions, but for the most part there just aren't any. And it just feels weirdly inconsistent at times when there should probably be a checkpoint and there just isn't one. You do have the ability to also play the Genesis game, except that's not really true. What it is still this game. It's just a lot harder to make it similar to the original Mega Drive release, I guess. Fortunately, you can add the Mega Drive music if you've unlocked it by, playing this game enough to bother doing that, which might be one of the few worthwhile unlocks this game actually has, but the visuals are still the visuals of this game, and those are awkward and clumsy at the best of times. But this game in general is awkward and clumsy, and it's functional, but it's not enjoyable. It desperately needs so many updates, so many quality of life changes, and so much extra effort to have put in to have made this game a worthwhile experience, and it just feels like the developer wasn't willing to put in that time or effort. This game also does not feature any sort of dub, so the localization is slacking off somewhat, and what's worse is it's not even entirely subbed. I remember playing the first level, and there was all I can assume to be background chatter. I don't know, it wasn't subbed, but there was a lot of dialogue going on. I couldn't figure out what was going on because I just didn't subtitle every line. They did fix some of the censorship the original version of the game had in regards to the plot, which is definitely appreciated, but there's so many things with the localization that I feel like could have been better done, and just in general, as a remake could have been better done. I mean, going all the way back to the start, in order to use one of the characters' like alternate portraits that shows them battle damage, they just sort of layer over that portrait on top of the talking head version of that particular portrait because they just couldn't be asked to create a animated talking version of it. It looks so incredibly half-assed and slapdash. And that's what this game is in general. The overall presentation to Assault Suit Leynos is abysmal. It looks terrible. Yeah, okay, it's hand-drawn and everything, but it doesn't animate remotely well. Like, it animates kind of like Ernest Evans, which every single individual part is animated separately from everything else, and it just doesn't look like a cohesive, moving, singular object. And having to compare this to Ernest Evans makes me sick, honestly, because Ernest Evans, yeah, it was janky, but I liked it, and as janky as it was bloody enduring for its jank, but this just looks horrible. There's an incredible amount of lighting effects pretty much everywhere, so much so that it's detrimental to the game itself. And I'm not just talking about the fact that the final boss is an absolute epileptic, seizure-inducing nightmare I had to play with my eyes closed. No, that's very true, and once again, if you're epileptic, don't play this game. But I mean just the fact that the lighting effects around just aesthetic light flares from explosions that wouldn't do anything, those are actually making it hard to see actual stuff going on. I frequently was not seeing bullets because there was like a lens flare in front of them that was just covering them all up. I guess you could make the case that that's realistic, that me as the pilot would not be able to see that, but if we're really going to make the realism argument, then I'd point out that if this is going to be realistic, then this game should be in first person because the pilot would not see himself from a side view. The lighting effects, the visual effects, even just the hand-drawn art style is bad. Like, it just, even if you take away everything fundamentally wrong with it, it looks bland at the best of times. Hell, I just turned on my retro Pie. We're gonna take a look at Target Wrath right now, and honestly, yeah, it's dated, but I think the Genesis version just flat out looks better. It looks a lot more cohesive, and it certainly looks a lot cleaner. I can actually tell what stuff is, and I can see the bullets. Stuff stands out a little bit more instead of just being a rather drab-looking mess. I can't tell what's going on the screen in this game half the time because of all the lighting and all the other horrible nonsense getting in the way, and there doesn't seem to be a way to turn that down or turn it off entirely. You just have to sit here with this giant amalgam of lens flares and just sort of suffer through it, and when you can see it, it's ugly, if not just straight up nondescriptly bland. There is like zero attempt at lip syncing in this game either. For a game that isn't remotely dubbed, it's kind of bizarre. The voices just don't match the lips at all. You'll get entire sentences where the characters aren't talking at all, but the VO is still continuing, and entire times where the characters are talking and there's no VO. It doesn't match at all, and it just looks really low quality and shoddy. It is not a good looking game by any means or measure. Audio wise, it's got voice acting, works well enough, I guess. I don't know. Again, the localization chose not to dub this game. The music, I couldn't even hear over the sound effects, so having sat back and listened to it, it's not that great, and honestly, I think I prefer the Genesis version. This game doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good, and everything about its presentation, honestly, with the exception of maybe the voice cast, just makes this game feel even cheaper than what it is. It feels like a cheap game that was slapped together to try and make money off nostalgia. Now, if you want a copy of Assault Suit Leynos on Steam, it is selling for $30, and nope, do not spend that on this. I would wait for this to go horribly low on sale, like $5, maybe 10 if this looks really, really good if you're interested, but $30 is egregious for this thing. I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to Sly Boots for hooking me up with this. I know it's taken me a while to get to this, but he wanted me to play this. And unfortunately, it just doesn't hit quite as well as it probably could, and I feel like that's probably just because there probably wasn't as much time or effort or resources poured into this as there could be. This does not feel like a remake that had gotten the time in the oven it deserved, and it's a shame. It doesn't play well, it doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good. There's not really anything about the game that feels overall enhanced based on the older version. You know, it's not like this game is designed for modern, controls so that it actually controls well or anything. It feels clumsy, it feels clunky, and it feels like a cheap, cynical cash-in to try and get people who have an interest in this game back in. And then maybe if they make a little bit of money, maybe make another low-budget sequel. That's what this feels like. And the fact is, it works, and that bare functionality is the most positive thing I can really say about it. It works. It's not all that much fun. There's lots of fundamental things about it that are wrong, and lots of things that need to be improved about it, and lots of things that both the localization and remastering of this game fail on a fundamental level to do, but it works. And I mean, if that's what you want, then I guess that's good enough. That said, I haven't played them on Steam, but I've seen a few indie attempts at Assault Suit go for cheaper that are much, much better looking, and someday I'd like to play them myself. There's a game called Steel Strider that's out there for not even $8. That looks basically like this, but better. Although the visuals do look a little bit bland, it's cheaper if nothing else, and it's probably a better experience. And apparently it has dual analog stick operated weapons, just reading its description. So it's already a fundamental better version of this. There's also Gigantic Army. Again, not even $8. You could get both of those games for about half the price of Assault Suit Leynos, and probably get a better gaming experience out of both of them individually than this game can do. The fact is, this game is functional. It's barely functional, and that's about the most positive thing it's got going on for it. You could also get the original Genesis version for about $50 on eBay, which, yeah, that's a step up, but at least it looks a lot better and sounds a lot better. Sure, the dialogue is going to be a lot weirder and it's going to be censored, but I honestly think it's probably going to be a better experience overall. And if nothing else, it's at least showing what we were like culturally back in the 90s for censorship and stuff, so at least it's kind of a cultural moment. Honestly, I can't recommend this game under any circumstances outside of, like, if you're a huge fan, you're willing to put up with a lot, because it's not a good remake, and there's tons of things that just don't work and are outright baffling as to why it was made this way. And they could have done so much more in regards to quality of life to actually bring up the player experience. And, not make this game outright unplayable for epileptics out there. But ultimately, this game is seemingly inferior to its original version, seemingly inferior to indie titles that are willing to cost a quarter what it's asking for, and those indie games seem to have a lot more passion put in than this. This seems like some sort of company mandate made to churn out a quick buck. and it just feels equally cynical and low effort, and if nothing else, certainly low quality.
大気圏突入まであと120秒です。